Hi, everybody. Welcome back to what is part two of chapter four, where Marcus and a very unsettled Nathan come together, and Nathan sees something on the back of the door of the bedroom on his return. Let's remember that he had an upset with Father Peter, who swore revenge on Nathan's impertinence towards his eminence and said it would come soon. So Nathan's in this situation of swirling around what Father Peter had said, what he had said. His anger is taking over his common sense. And then, excuse me, and then he turns around and suddenly says to Marcus, one of the other children, and his stepbrother, that Madame is taken care of. There's something on the back of the door. So we'll take it from here. This is chapter 4, part 2, plus the whole of chapter 5. I regain my composure. This is Nathan, and remember the story is seen through Nathan's eyes. I got up, and after pacing around the room a few times, I became calmer, but remained lost for words. Just as I was about to speak to Marcus, I noticed something hanging on the door. It resembled something I once read about, referred to as a voodoo doll. It had many different coloured pins stuck in it, with my name attached to one of them. Now I was completely distraught. We both observed the doll for some time without touching it. Then Marcus reached out to grab it. I stopped him just before he could get a hold of it. I was crying now and shaking all over. I told Marcus the villagers referred to this thing as the death doll. It always meant that somebody was wishing bad luck on you, and only a non-believer could break the spell. A believer could never touch the doll for fear of being possessed by the spell it carried. And after some discussion, we agreed we would look for Fred. Because the voices were incessantly talking to me, I repeatedly had to ask Marcus to speak up. Initially, I thought Marcus was up to one of his old tricks again. Bleary-eyed and full of goose pimples, we sneaked back under the blankets for comfort and shared a cigarette. Meant to say, brother, what a performance you put on for us tonight. Sorry for being so quiet at the meal, but I couldn't help think of Sheila's old saying, out of the frying pan and into the fire, which is exactly where you're going today when Madame summons you, said Marcus. Yeah, I know, but I've more important things to deal with right now, like that, I said, and I pointed to the back of my door, where the word beware was written in red ink. That's bad, all right. I think we should get His Eminence to bless the room. What do you think? Asked Marcus. No way. I don't want anyone to know anything about this. Honestly, it would only draw attention to me. I have to act normally, otherwise the person who did this will think that they have won, I replied sheepishly. Fred told me a similar story, one that took place when he was in Africa. The local religious man got rid of the doll immediately because they believed it would hold the curse forever. Think about it, Nathan. You may never grow. You'll be an elf, said Marcus. I'll elf you in a minute. Stop talking such gibberish before I stick my boot up your arse, I replied. We both laughed so loud at this that Marcus almost choked on the cigarette smoke. But really, Marcus, Madame has told me that I've a mouth of me like a sewer rat, and Nellie has said that my comments are as black as your boot. But I don't deserve this. I'm actually scared, Marcus, I replied, shaking. Why don't you try talking to somebody neutral? Say that quiet nun that Father Peter brought with him. Now, what was her name? Oh, yes, Sister Anne. If she's as quiet as they say, then she will definitely help you, and not say a word to anyone. Perfect, eh? Insisted Marcus. I suppose so. I definitely feel better anyway. I'll go if you come with me, though. I need to feel safe, I replied, shaken still. I definitely don't want Father Peter hearing about this. He blamed me straight away, I added. You need to let some daylight into that head of yours, though. Honestly, no matter what that man does or tries to say, you have to release it. It's Madame who's in charge here, and nothing will happen without her say so. What did you have in mind? Asked an enthused Marcus. Well, I think he will try to say that I need a break, followed by some medication. Then he'll suggest I spend some time in hospital, and I fear that'll be the last of me, I replied. Never. Madame would see that as a breakup of her family, stuttered Marcus. There's no way she would allow it, trust me. Nor would I, brother. We're all brothers. Oh, none of us would ever allow such an awful thing to happen, ever, said Marcus defiantly. Marcus returned to his room, and I lay in my bed, with my eyes fixed to the bedroom door. And after completing her nightly rounds, Sheila arrived and came into my bedroom. She looked towards me coolly and acknowledged my presence with half-opened eyes. I sensed that she was definitely laughing at me. I suspected that she was in some way involved with this voodoo doll. Before leaving the bedroom, she made no comment whatsoever upon seeing it. I soon fell asleep. The next morning I dressed myself and then summoned up the courage to go to the kitchen, where the rest of the brothers was just finishing breakfast. As always, Madame came in to join us for a little chat, although on this particular morning she arrived half naked, with her usual conservative attire forgotten about. Now, to say what we saw and to say we got an eyeful is definitely an understatement. Sheila screeched upon me seeing Madame, telling her that her guest was still in the house, and she insisted that she would return to her bedroom to dress her properly. Slowly turning around, Madame followed Sheila's instruction and headed back. Once she had left the kitchen, we all fell into hysterics, laughing at her antics. The next part of the day started out as normal, with Fred giving us our chores. When they were completed, we all had individual tutoring, and after supervising us in the library for study, Father Peter's two priests joined us for their first religious lesson. These juniors were intrigued by us and fascinated with how we interacted with each other, and unlike most normal kids our age, we also liked to study and agreed with Madame that it was a very interesting part of our day. We considered ourselves lucky, as most parents could not afford to have their children educated, and so they spent their time roaming the streets with nothing else to do. The ones who were fortunate enough to get the schooling were in classes of 40 to 50 students of various ages. We were very lucky indeed, having a different priest for each subject teaching us everything we needed to know. Strange as it may seem, our favourite subject was in fact religion, for it gave us an insight into the outside world, and with these two guinea pigs teaching us, I was determined to find out as much about the outside world as I could. Once Father Jared had given instructions, he looked at us, his class of happy smiling boys, and he complimented us, saying that he loved to spend his time watching us and that Madame must be so very proud. Luke responded immediately, "She is so, Father, very." Red-faced Father Jared continued with his polite chit-chat, and in return we decided to be gentle on him. Every other new tutor before him had made the mistake of asking us if we had any questions about the outside world, and Father Jared was no different. Big mistake. We went berserk asking a barrage of questions until almost 4:30, the time of our lessons for the day, usually finished. This pair of innocents standing before us, Father Jared and Father Eamon, tried to answer all our questions, but time was running out. There'd be no more answers to any questions once Father Ted arrived to dismiss us for the day. Meanwhile, Father Jared continued to answer them, and Father Damien remained silent in the background, writing down notes. Father Jared, is it? Well, I was wondering if you could tell me if God is the man who looks after the people in the village, I inquired. Your name is... Nathan, is it not? Well, Nathan, yes, he is. Why do you ask? Inquired Father Jared. Well, Father, I heard from the workers in the village that Father Peter is a bad person who governs the workhouse, the maze, where the poor people leave the children, and that he puts all the children who are bold into a basement room where they are burnt, and that he sends their souls to hell, I replied. What? I don't know who would have said such dreadful things. You may all be rest assured that God is the only one who can send people to hell, replied the startled Father Jared. So, is hell not down to in the basement of the workhouse? I continued. No, definitely not, Nathan. Hell is a mysterious place where only God knows the score. He deciphers who goes there, and I'm sure that it's not the basement of the workhouse, or any such place for that matter, he replied firmly. Oh, but it is, Father Jared, and I think after your first day's teaching at the maze, you should check it out for yourself. I can assure you, Father Peter would want you to report to us your findings in order to put our troubled minds at rest, I replied sharply. Honestly, Nathan, I don't expect to find anything. I must say, what a vivid imagination you have. Has Madame never mentioned to you that you should never speak to strangers, and never speak and take back unfounded gossip to her home? Continued Father Jared. Why, of course she has, Father Jared. Nevertheless, they do say the body of an old priest is kept in a coffin there, and it used to torture the children. When they misbehave, they're made to kiss the corpse repeatedly. Some say the corpse is actually the devil. This cruel practice is repeated in order to keep these children working hard and to keep them quiet for the rest of the time spent at the workhouse, I continued in a raised voice. Really, Nathan, look, when I'm next there, I'll look into it. Now, until then, are there any other questions? Oh, please, Tom, go ahead and ask your question, implored Father Jared. Father, I know that we do not go to church, but I was told by a Catholic woman one time that you have a collection box in the church called the Black Box. It's used for helping the black children, apparently. There's a picture of it, of a black person. Why do priests ask people for money for black children? Asked Tom. Well, Tom, it's like this, and that's easy to answer. It's to help people less fortunate than ourselves in foreign countries, nodded Father Jared. Really? I've never seen a black person. In fact, when I come to think of it, I've never even seen a picture of one. I'll probably never get to experience this within my lifetime, for I know I'm not allowed to leave Linden Hall to ever find out. The nearest I've encountered to black children are you, the priests, dressed up in your black robes. So is this money you collect for these so-called black people really going to you and the church? Inquired Tom, smiling. No, it's going to the church. It does go to those poor black people eventually, where the black people live, and that country is called Africa. I'm sure that when you leave Linden Hall, you'll one day meet a black person other than a priest, and find out for yourself how the church have helped these people. Now, next question. Yes, you over there, huffed the disgruntled Father Jared. Father, about God. Do you think he's punishing us by keeping us inside Linden Hall and never allowing any of us to freely experience the outside world? Inquired Adam. It's not really for me to say, Adam, replied Father Jared. But surely as a servant of God you must know everything. Aren't you supposed to be able to speak to him even though you don't see him? But what's your point, Adam? Added a nervous Father Jared. Well, it's this. Can you not speak to him now in prayer and see if he answers you back before time runs out? I want to know if we'll all see the outside world, Adam continued. I'll tell you what. I'll pray tonight and tomorrow and give you an answer then. Prayers takes time before being answered. Remember too that everything comes to those who wait, smiled Father Jared. But we have been waiting for a long time for this to be answered, Father. In fact, 11 years has been so far for me, replied Tom. I'm sure a little longer won't do you any harm then, reassured Father Jared politely. You're right. Tomorrow will do. After all, prayers are answered more quickly, and your prayers especially, than ours. Because of our religious views, we don't actually pray that often. However, Madame has told us priests have a direct pathway to God, so I trust in you to get back to me with an answer, smiled Adam. What? Oh, she may be wrong about that now. God has the whole world to deal with. He has many prayers to answer. Thus it can sometimes take a lot longer to answer individual requests such as yours, replied a tired Father Jared. And he told you this himself, did he, Father? Asked Luke. Now, boys, I must end this lesson early. I'm getting a splitting headache. Really, you can go early, and I'll speak to you all again tomorrow. Oh, now what? Tutted Father Jared disapprovingly. Father, will you see if there's a hell in the basement of the workhouse? As I'd be able to sleep much better, especially if you, a blessed man of the cloth, confirmed that there was no hell nearby, I replied with a smug smile. Okay, when I finish my duties there tomorrow, I'll check it out for myself. Now you can all go and rest in peace, in the knowledge that God will protect you even from the devil himself. Say one Our Father, one Hail Mary before bedtime, and you'll be fine. I know Madame prefers no Catholic teachings to be taught, but prayers never did anybody any harm, and it's up to you to decide. Now be gone, and I will see you all about the same time tomorrow, replied Father Jared. Once out of the room, my brothers quizzed me, demanding to know why I was asking so many questions about the basement, and how I could tell them that my friend from the workhouse had informed me of the basement. As a reply, this would put him in danger, and so I can't expose him, and I didn't want to tell my brothers any more of the horrific things that were going on down there. So in answer to them, it was short, brief, and I remained silent. Madame had trusted me to escort Fred and Sheila on their mission of mercy to the workhouse once a month, and these trips meant a lot to me because it gave me the opportunity to leave the confines of the hall, even if it was only now and again. If Madame found out that I was carrying stories of upset back to Linden Hall, that would be the end of any more outings. Therefore, I told my brothers I'd overheard a conversation on one of my trips there and gave them only the skeleton details about the basement. Next, we all ran into the old playrooms to relax and unwind, and in the meantime, Father Jared made an appointment to call and see his friend, Father Peter, at the workhouse. I'd aroused his curiosity about the basement and of the maze to such an extent that he decided to go and actually investigate. That evening, on his arrival, Father Jared relayed his concerns from what he had heard at Linden Hall to a drunken watchman who was patrolling the grounds. Taking a deep breath, Father Jared demanded where the basement door was situated. The watchman directed him, and after lighting a lantern, Father Jared set off on his mission. He had no idea what horror awaited him. It was an evening that he would never forget. Father Jared was a nervous wreck when he got to the entrance. Nevertheless, he made his way down the dark spiral stairwell. The place was cold and eerie, and he began to feel as if he was walking on somebody's grave. Fear of the unknown wreaked havoc with his mind. I believe that exactly what happened to Father Jared when he discovered what lay hidden deep inside the basement. The next day, Madame told us Father Jared had left his position due to circumstances beyond his control. And the following day, Father Peter visited me personally to inform me that I would be monitored from now on. In addition, he promised that come hell or high water, he would find out where I got my information from. He then forbade me to go on to the next mission of mercy, outing that week to the workhouse. Excuse me. So you're up to your old tricks again, Master Nathan. I do hope you're pleased with yourself. Father Jared was a dedicated man, but you've done me a huge favour. You've shown me that he's weak, vulnerable, qualities I cannot abide in a man. And you've saved me a huge disappointment in the future, snarled Father Peter. Oh well, you're welcome, Father. You know I'm always glad of being service, I mocked. Really, Nathan? I must get you to swear that in front of Madame. One of these fine, fine days. And trust me when I tell you that I may call upon your services sooner than you think. Thank you again for your offer, which I assure you I'll take up very soon. Father Peter shouted as quickly as he walked away. But I remained stuttering. I couldn't even get the words out of my mouth. But it was. Uh, it, it was just a joke. It seemed the last laugh was on me. No, no, Nathan, surely you're not going to renege your kind offer so soon. I'll talk to you in the near future, laughed Father Peter as he left. All I could stutter was, I'll see you then, before my throat became so dry I gasped for water. And to myself I asked, what have I done? Undeterred, I later went in search of Madame to apologise for my behaviour the day before. I found her lying in the dining room, looking quite serene and surprisingly in good form. I made my apologies tightly and tried to explain that Father Peter just seemed to bring out the worst in me. I admitted I had no reason to behave the way I'd done. In addition, I said I'd go to His Eminence and apologise to him as well. She was impressed by my maturity and told me she'd always love me, even if I could be somewhat volatile at times. I felt much better once I had made amends with the Archbishop. He explained that I reminded him of himself when he was my age. Then he patted me on the shoulder, telling me to be careful for my own sake. He told me I was like an adult trapped in a child's body, and that I should stop trying to be that adult and go on and enjoy my childhood. He told me that life was not always what it seemed to be. Excuse me again. That I should accept my new life at Linden Hall and just enjoy it. He also warned me that his patience was running out where my recent behaviour was concerned. After all, he said, he was only human, could not tolerate much more. We did agree that if I improved immediately, he would forget about the last few days. Walking away, I actually began to feel remorse. They say you should always smile in the face of adversity, and I feel that I'd done a good job of this where Father Peter was concerned. So why then did I feel a huge compulsion to carry on being verbally angry whenever I was in the presence of this man? As the day turned into evening, Madame summoned my brothers and me to the library. She told us her guests had decided to leave early the following morning. As a gesture of goodwill, Madame wanted to present them with gifts as a show of appreciation for all they had done and what would continue to do for us as a family. The boys became very excited at the prospect of selecting and wrapping the gifts. I was just very grateful that they were leaving. That night, I got on my knees and I prayed for forgiveness, a way in which I had been behaving and acting both verbally and physically. However, because I was a firm believer in the fact that there was a reason for everything, I also asked God to send me a sign that would explain the voices which I kept hearing in my head. When I eventually finished my prayers, I went to turn around to turn off the light before getting in. In doing so, I caught the sight of the voodoo doll again, still hanging on the door. Enraged by this, I grabbed the doll and threw it outside my bedroom window, into the thorn bushes below, and retired to bed. Tom and Luke, who were very excited having discovered that Nellie was in charge of the kitchen as Sheila was, had to go to visit her poor mother, who had become ill over the period of the weekend, woke me the following morning in their excitement. This meant we could all look forward to hot bread for breakfast. Telling me to dress quickly, they set off in advance to gorge upon the hot bread and fresh butter with rosemary homemade jam as soon as possible. Catching the boys in a headlock, I managed to stall them for long enough to grab my shorts and slippers and run out of the bedroom first towards the kitchen. Shocked, my brothers pursued me while screaming with excitement at the top of their lungs. Laughing and grabbing each other, we screeched like little girls who had just seen a mouse. Hearing all the fuss and palaver, one of the Latin teachers called Father Orwell, who resided at Linden Hall, ventured out into the hallway. He could only laugh when Tom also joined in, pushing his brothers and me, shouting the bread was his. Well now, I've seen it all, responded a bemused Father Orwell. Aye, I'm not the last. Told you I wouldn't be, laughed the gleeful Tom. Shite, I can't believe I'm the last. You tricked us nicely, Nathan. Madame's you are one to watch for. Madame often said you were one to watch for, and she was right, said Luke, unimpressed at being the last to reach the kitchen. Well, you win some, you lose some, hey, Luke? Not really a great start when you're approaching your teenage years, is it, dearest brother? Especially knowing you're the last at doing everything. I jeered triumphantly. Entering the kitchen, we found Adam and Marcus with their mouths covered in jam. They sat with a smug grin on their face like two Cheshire cats that had just licked all the cream. Noticing our disheartened expression, Rosemary the cook told us she had just gone a bit over the top with the bread, and so reassured us there was plenty of extra food for all of us. With Marcus and Adam stuffing their faces as if they had not eaten for days, it was just as well. Nellie asked us if they had been at the Lord's Last Supper, and Marcus and Adam had big enough bellies to have eaten all of the fish to feed the 5,000. We all fell around the place laughing as we watched both Adam and Marcus blush with embarrassment. You're all very excited today, boys. What's going on? Asked Nellie. Haven't you heard? Replied Tom. The royal guests are leaving this morning and won't be returning for some time. Really? That's strange. But I'm not at all surprised, considering Master Nathan's behaviour. You really have acted very strangely indeed, Nathan. Maybe you felt threatened by their presence and their pompous attitude. Anyway, they're off now. We can all get back to some sort of normality, replied Nellie in a hopeful tone. Yes, indeed, and maybe Madame will stop drinking so much now. She was barely able to tell us they were leaving when we met her earlier, remarked Tom. Well, in fairness to her, looking after you lot and running Linden Hall is no easy task. In fact, it's a huge responsibility for any woman. Looking at the state of me, I've only been in this morning, and look at me now. A mess. And later Madame wants me to look after the whole house because Sheila's at her mother's for a while, but sure yous know that. It certainly's been a crazy time around here the last few days. Maybe they're all treating themselves to a day out, Nellie mocked. I suppose you're right, Nellie. Things are a bit more difficult for Madame without a man around. Do you think she'll ever find one? Luce asked. Ach, Luke, trust me when I say this. A man is the last thing Madame would want around here. Sure, isn't she a very wealthy woman? And wouldn't it be very difficult to find anybody? Who'd want her money? And who'd want her position? And who'd want many? But yet many never come. And secondly, any man would have to deal with you lot. And finally, yet the most importantly, you're the only man that Madame has told me she wants in her life. Ach, sure, she's told me this herself many times, nodded Nellie. As Nellie prepared to clean the silverware, the other kitchen staff cleaned up and prepared the evening meal. The amount of equipment required to do this was amazing, and each staff had a particular function. With a bit of effort and luck, it all came together. This type of work showed in all the faces of the staff. Their skin was weathered from hard work they had become accustomed to over the years, and their hands, along with their attitudes, were as tough as old boots. That morning we all had eaten more than our fair share of Nellie's delicious hot bread, washing it all down with fresh lukewarm tea. I would not be forgetting this treat in a hurry, and Madame could only smile when she found us all in the kitchen with our faces covered in jam. I take it from your faces that you've all enjoyed this morning's breakfast, she mused to herself. It obviously went down a treat. And now you can all help me wrap the presents. Now do go and get yourselves organised, and then meet me in half an hour in the dining room, Madame said, clapping her hands. We were all looking forward to being able to relax once our visit had finally left and the gates were shut. So we were encouraged to hurry to our rooms and dress accordingly for the presentation of those gifts as they departed. Madame had obviously decided how she wanted us to look, for she left the clothes that she wished us to wear on our respective beds. However, with what she chose, I felt we would end up looking like altar boys waiting to receive their first Holy Communion. After dressing, We headed downstairs where Madame greeted us smiling. She was obviously really pleased and immediately gave herself a little clap, cooing to herself as she did so. Oh, boys, boys, boys. Mummy is so pleased with the way you have turned out. You're a credit to both yourselves and Linden Hall. Oh, you may be approaching your teenage years, but you'll always be my little boys. A fine-looking group of men you are. Even if I do say so myself, giggled Madame, clapping her hands again. She instructed us on how she exactly wanted us to wrap the presents. We loved her dearly and followed her precise instructions until our task was complete. Obviously, Madame felt the same, and felt when things were good between us, they were very good indeed. But little did we know that soon things were to become extremely bad. Chapter 5 is short and brief, and I'll start. Chapter 5 is called The Departure. Madame always enjoyed spending quality time with us in the knowledge that it would help us to bond with each other and with her. And in her eyes, she'd always had the perfect mother. She was always the perfect mother. Not once had our opinion changed. Her actions spoke louder than any words ever could. And on completing our tasks, she gave each of us a glass of lemonade as a treat, and then summoned the staff to organise the guests' final breakfast. At 8 o'clock, everything was ready. Always curious about the outside world, Madame could usually anticipate our questions before we even asked them. Today it was Adam's turn, and he wanted to know what Dublin was like. When she asked him why he wanted to know, he said that it just looked beautiful in the books that he had seen. Madame explained that looks could be deceiving and that Dublin was very slow to develop economically. And she told us about the 1916 Rising and about the hardship the Irish people had to endure to gain their freedom and their independence from England. There was not enough money circulating in the country to develop Dublin as a result of their departure, she said. Nevertheless, she held our attention as she elaborated greatly on the stuff that Adam had read about, giving us a truly wonderful account of the real Dublin. Our imaginations were able to fill any gaps we thought she might have left out. Finally, she told us that the people of Dublin had a great habit of throwing their rubbish out into the streets, causing a huge amount of illnesses throughout the city. The streets are filled with massive potholes caused by the horses and carts, and automobiles are constantly parading around the feeble streets. It is indeed beautiful to watch, but the damage is unbelievable. A woman would have to wear very strong boots if she intended to walk the streets, as they were so uneven and so badly damaged. The streets are made from a mixture of granite and cement, she said, and the noise of the horses' shoes jolting along could be heard throughout the city, she explained. Then she informed us we ought to be grateful for living in the quiet in the countryside. She went on saying that she felt the tram system ought to be updated, as they were completely overcrowded and stuffy, and obviously we would never experience this, she elaborated, as we would always travel first class, courtesy of dear old Fred. She laughed and recalled how a man once rode to Linden Hall on an old bike to request her hand in marriage. She could not possibly take him seriously, and on refusing him he had to ride the 20 miles or so back home. Everybody laughed at her story, but she defended her suitor, stating that such an action showed strength of character. Nighttime tended to be particularly horrible in Dublin, she continued, as this was when the ladies of the nights appeared. And these were bad women and a scourge to decent society. Madame did not explain why she felt this way about them, but she did tell us we were never to talk to them, at least not until we were much older, and then she would explain why. All she said was they were witches of the night, for they wore big black cape-type coats with very little underneath. She then mentioned streets such as O'Connell and Kildare Street, and many more, and she continued to talk about the city until Nellie announced, "Breakfast is now served." We all looked at each other, feeling sick at the thoughts of eating again. Madame instructed us to eat everything that was put in front of us, or we would disappoint our guests upon leaving. Laughing and jeering aloud at Tom, we teased him about the nappy story Madame had told us once. Then we made our way back to the dining room to eat a second time. We were all in great form, and nothing that either Father Peter or His Eminence would say that morning could upset us. As we moved to sit in our usual places, Father Peter told me that Madame had informed him I was to go on the next mission of mercy, despite the fact that I had appalled everybody with my behaviour. I apologised yet again and promised that I would behave better in the future. He seemed to accept my apology and said that he looked forward to my next visit and that he would look after me personally. A cold shiver ran down my spine at the thought of this, and nevertheless I continued to smile at him and began to eat the breakfast put in front of me. His Eminence, as usual, ate breakfast in his room. We began to fidget while waiting for His Eminence's departure, and Madame fussed with her hair, and everybody else seemed to be fiddling with something or the other. And then Sheila entered the room and told us that the guests were waiting in the hallway to say goodbye. We proceeded to the hall, with the staff lined up waiting to deliver their final duty of the day. Madame stood and in a short speech told her guests that she would like to make a presentation to them on behalf of us all. His Eminence smiled at everybody and patted me on the shoulder. It was a nice touch, and I returned the smile. But I did feel very guilty, and Father Peter thanked us all for our efforts in making their stay such a pleasant one and told us, "You'll all be rewarded in heaven." After formal handshakes, everybody smiled at each other falsely, and when the guests were gone, Madame handed each member of the staff an envelope containing her wages. She began to cry and explained to us it was from relief. Now that the visit was finally over, her conclusion was that everything had gone well. She told my brothers and I that she was going to reward us with a day trip to Dublin at the end of the month. As the final cars departed, I went outside and noticed one of the young priests waving an envelope at me with my name on it. When I got closer and asked what it was, he just frowned and threw it at me. Madame didn't ask me to open it in front of her. Instead, she politely ordered the extra staff to get ready to leave Linden Hall and return to their respective employers, whether that be our neighbours, the workhouses or the convent. And in a unified silent act, they turned around and left. Father Peter left word that a van would collect them within an hour of his departure. Madame finished her day by thanking all her own staff for their hard work. Bidding them good night, she then turned around and headed for the comfort of her own bedroom. That's chapter 5. In my next video, I shall continue with chapter 6, and the title will be The Awakening. Thank you for listening, everybody. I'd look forward to your likes and comments, and I hope you subscribe to my channel as well. This is Author Patrick Lorcan Woods, and this is Madame Part 1, Bittersweet Goodbyes of my trilogy. Take care for now.